Thanks, Kate, and welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King. Thanks for sharing your day with us. Major early turmoil in the Trump White House. The National Security Advisor resigns and acknowledges he misled the vice president and others about his contacts with Russia.
You're presuming what General Flynn did or did not know. But the key here, and I want to repeat it, the key here is the misleading of the vice president and others, the incomplete information or the inability to completely recall what did or did not happen as reflected in his debriefing of particular phone calls.
The new Treasury Secretary is on the job, the new Veteran Affairs Secretary too, but the president's choice for Labor Secretary is short votes at the moment. At least 4 Republicans aren't ready to commit, and Democrats are turning up the heat. And Republicans have a giant Obamacare problem. Angry crowds at town halls have some lawmakers saying, let's take a cautious approach. But conservatives are demanding an immediate repeal vote, even though the party has no consensus on a replacement.
We will have a stable transition where no one has the rug pulled out from under them while we work toward a better, more stable system. So this step-by-step approach will rescue people from Obamacare's collapse and give every American access to affordable, quality health care. This is how we deliver on our promise to the American people.
We'll watch as that plays out. With us to share their reporting and their insights this day, Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report, Jonathan Martin of the New York Times, Matt Visor of the Boston Globe, and Karen Tumulty of the Washington Post. Michael Flynn is out as National Security Advisor, but there's still plenty of turmoil in the Trump White House. General Flynn announced his resignation late last night, acknowledging, quote, I inadvertently briefed the vice president-elect and others with incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador. This isn't over. The FBI is investigating those calls as part of a larger investigation into alleged contacts between Trump associates and the Kremlin. There are several congressional investigations underway, too. And the president now needs to pick a new national security advisor while dealing with horrible early poll numbers and other West Wing infighting. And it is, ladies and gentlemen, as we start the conversation, day 26. It's interesting. All white, this is, some personnel issues, some hiccups happen to every White House early on.
Yes.
So you could say, let's not over-exaggerate this. At the same time, this is the National Security Advisor. And the president tweeting today, let's start with this. The president tweeting, the real story here is why are there so many illegal leaks coming out of Washington? Will these leaks be happening as I deal on North Korea, et cetera? With apologies to the president, that is a story. Leaks are always a story in Washington, but that's not the real story. His national security advisor had to resign 25 days into the administration.
On an issue that is not going away, which is the issue of Russia. And now the bigger problem for the president is that Republicans, especially Senate Republicans, saying we are going to do more investigating. This is now sort of put a fire in their belly to move forward on an issue that we know is still simmering from before he even took office, right? What happened in the campaign, the Russia involvement there, and now we put Michael Flynn, what he knew, when he knew it, and of course what the president knew and when he knew it.
Right, and at the top of the show, you heard the presidential counselor, Kellyanne Conway, say the issue here is that Mike Flynn misrepresented himself, or in Mike Pence's view, lied to the vice president of the United States. That's certainly one issue politically, but, well then, so it was okay? That's the question. Was it okay that he called the Russian ambassador on the day the Obama administration was imposing sanctions? Was it okay? And let me, before I bring you to
Trump know, too, right? What did Trump know about it?
Well, that's just it. Listen to Lindsey Graham here. He was on with Kate last hour, and the question is, it's an old question, what did the president know and when did he know it? Lindsey Graham, a Republican, says, let's find out.
I'd have a hard time believing that General Flynn would get on the phone with a Russian ambassador and suggest that, don't worry, we will revisit this when we get to be president in terms of executive sanctions, without some understanding that the administration would be sympathetic to the idea. Now, I may be wrong.
On this issue, and then more broadly, what does it mean when you have senior Republicans essentially saying, let's investigate our president?
Well, I think that the real lesson from these leaks should be, for the president, for his entire team, that if you put out the truth in the first place, you are not going to be undermined by subsequent leaks that come out about what they would call alternative facts.
The irony here, one of the narratives of this Trump administration has been their looseness with the facts, from the crowd sizes or New Hampshire voting. And this was like a lie too far almost for the administration. They were the ones being lied to and being misled, apparently.
But are they mad that are they mad that General Flynn misled or lied, pick your term. Again, I know from sources in the White House, the vice president feels he was lied to and then sent onto national television to repeat that lie. He feels his credibility was undermined here. But whether you want to say misrepresented, whether you say misled, is that the crime, or is it the crime that it leaked out that it happened?
Well, it seems like from what Kellyanne Conway was saying, if you can believe her facts, that they're not alternative facts, that, they're troubled that he was misleading them internally. And so that seems to be one of the issues for them to grapple with, that was what pushed him out.
And yet they were told.
Coverage, though,
the reason I asked this question
Trump
is.
responds to the coverage in the media.
Right. The reason I asked the question is that weeks ago, the acting attorney general, Sally Yates, who has since been fired because she refused to enforce the travel ban, weeks ago, we now know from reporting, told the White House the intercepts show that he did talk about sanctions. And so if he is telling you he did not, the intercepts show that he did. If he keeps saying he did not, then he is subject to blackmail from the Russians, because they can come in and say, General Flynn, we now hold your job in our hands because we have this.
And what I'm saying is, I think the fact that that story was reported and published is why Flynn got pushed out, not because of the actual substance of it. Trump's entirely responsive to media coverage. That's how he's always operated, before politics and during the campaign, certainly now. And the critical mass of coverage hit a point yesterday where three major papers, the Washington Post, New York Times, and the Journal, all had front page lead stories about turmoil at the NSC. Trump responds to that. And so I think that was the end of it. But it's not the end of the story, because there is no issue, John, besides Russia, that so cleaves the Republican Party from Donald Trump. On trade, yeah, Trump's a bit of an outlier from the party elites, and certainly immigration, he's maybe more of a hardliner. But Russia, more than anything else, he has very little backing on Capitol Hill for his stance towards Putin and Moscow. There are a handful of House members, but really the entire Senate Republican caucus is lined up from McConnell all the way down against Trump's stance on Putin and Russia. That's the danger here for Trump, is that this is not the end of the story, because the Senate Republicans are going to investigate this, and they're going to call up folks to the Hill.
That it wasn't just, to see Lindsey Graham on TV, he's been doing this for quite some time. To see John McCain say something, there's nothing surprising about that. But when you see Roy Blunt come out and say, we have to have an exhaustive investigation, senator from Missouri, now you're starting to see a breach in that
known as a leadership, loyal Republican
exactly.
guy.
And somebody who, quite frankly, owed his election to the success of Trump in Missouri.
Saved his bacon, if you will.
Definitely did. So when those kinds of folks are coming out, now look, he also has the benefit of he just won re-election. He has 6 years before this starts coming home. But the Senate definitely has the leeway that the House doesn't. They're still going to be very quiet, because they're looking at a guy with a 90% approval rating among Republicans, and they're all up for re-election.
You make an interesting point about the dichotomy between the Senate and the House, 6-year terms, plus those guys, most of them in their districts, because of the way they're drawn. Trump did very well. So listen here. Here's the leader of House Republicans, Paul Ryan. Listen closely. The end of this is interesting.
National security is perhaps the most important function or responsibility a president has. And I think the president made the right decision to ask for his resignation. You cannot have a national security advisor misleading the vice president and others. As soon as they realize that they were being misled by their national security advisor, they asked for his resignation.
That's a couple of things here. The last part, as soon as they realize, no, they've known. That they have known, if they believe what they were told by the Justice Department, they have known for several weeks. So it's not as soon as. As soon as it became public, maybe. The other part is, Paul Ryan is a close friend of the vice president. The White House line is that General Flynn decided it was time for him to resign, that the president didn't ask for it. He just realized he had become a distraction. He resigned. The speaker's a very close friend of the vice president. He says, when he says publicly, is he just getting out over his skis, or is he telling us something we need to know?
Oh, I think it was pretty obvious. He was asked
Humpty
to
Dumpty
resign.
was pushed?
And what was that? How many hours after Kellyanne Conway gets on national television and says he has the full confidence of the president? Just the amount of chaos in this White House is demonstrated, and not just every day, but it feels like every 3 or 4 hours.
The other thing here too is what it says about Mike Pence and his role in this administration, that Trump seems to have his back, and that came on a day when Pence was on the Hill, and I think people probably recognize that Pence is speaking for the administration in a way that Trump is backing him up, so much so that they're willing to force out Flynn.
But if that's the case, why did it take so long?
Yeah, your paper last Thursday night posted a story about the very facts here, that Flynn apparently misled Mike Pence about his phone call with the Russian ambassador. This decision wasn't made until late Monday evening. I mean, what took so long?
Remember, General Flynn was with Trump early on in the campaign. Remember, he joined the chants at the Republican National Convention about lock her up.
Right.
So he has a base in the Trump wing of the party and had a base with the president. To your point about Mike Pence, the president had to make a tough choice. Right. Who am I going to be loyal to at this moment? And I think you're right about the public.
Despite his catch line, Trump actually doesn't like firing people, right?
The public disclosure line cut up. So you heard the speaker there being interesting, if you read between the lines, but pretty cautious. This is the president's call. The president made the right call, I think. Listen to House Democrats. To Amy's point that the House Republicans are much less likely to want to dig deeper, listen to a leading House Democrat.
It wasn't Flynn's lie that brought him down. It was the public exposure of that lie. The White House, as you've reported, knew about this weeks ago and did nothing to remove him. So this is either a White House that was knowledgeable and supportive of these secret conversations with the Russians about sanctions, or that simply has a very high tolerance for a patent falsehood. It's not, I think, as Kellyanne Conway says, a simple matter of his misleading the vice president. It was the vice president then misleading the entire country, and they were okay with that when it hadn't been exposed by the press.
That's the Democratic perspective. Welcome to polarized Washington. To the point you made earlier, Amy, this is the House Intelligence Chairman, Chairman Nunes, who says, let's investigate the leaks. Who says, let's investigate the leaks, not let's investigate what General Flynn was talking to the Russians about, which is what the Democrats want to get at and what the Justice Department is looking at. But he also said, he was asked, asked about Trump conversations, the presidential conversations with General Flynn. He said that would be executive privilege. I don't want to get into what the president. No, these happened during the transition, and the chairman knows this. The president-elect Trump has no executive privilege. If he's talking to his national security advisor designate about conversations with the Russian ambassador, at that point, now the president of the United States was a private citizen.
Well, then the other question comes in: where is the other leadership at the White House? Where's the White House chief of staff? Where's Steve Bannon in all of this? The people that should be sort of corralling the White House in at this point also seem to be undercut. Reince Priebus getting thrown under the bus left and right these days by friends of Donald Trump. Breitbart News today with a big front page splash about how he should be thrown out. So now you're a White House. Imagine you're dealing with this. You have no idea what your lines of authority are. Nobody knows in the White House who they're supposed to listen to, take their marching orders from. Oh, and by the way, not only is it day 26, but you're supposed to by now have put up a tax bill, an Obamacare repeal, move forward on the wall. None of that's going.
Well, we're going to continue that conversation, especially some of the palace intrigue. But you're right. The president campaigned, I'm going to run the government like a business. I hired the best people. There are a lot of conversations in town about whether that's the case. It is day 26. That means there are 1,435 days left of the first Trump term. Up next, 2 more Trump cabinet picks are on the job. I think a third might be, actually, by this afternoon. But another nominee is in trouble. And speaking of trouble, conservatives now pushing to repeal Obamacare ASAP.